here on Jack Chew's Chew It Over. Firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you to Jack for inviting me to take this honor and to do something that I think is so close to my heart in terms of us being honest, open, authentic, and able to challenge each other's views and opinions so openly on this platform. So you will see me every second Tuesday of the month, coming onto your screens and completely gracing you. Now, I know that some of my conversations with Jack, particularly some of the depth of it, really started when I spoke to Jack about some BAME related issues, maybe more in terms of the Black Lives Matter component of that and the relationship of that and physiotherapy. And I felt that it was pivotal for me to start with a topic that closely related to that, but was something that was all inclusive and that everyone in any workplace, private or NHS, could get the beauty of, could really benefit from. And I thought none other than to bring on Arnie Puntis, who is an AHP Clinical Fellow in London. I'm wondering whether I pronounced her surname correctly, but I'm going to bring her on and she will be introducing herself a little bit more. Topic of conversation today is to discuss the impact of the second wave on the BAME network in particular, but also how that has then impacted the workplace as a whole. You know, we know that conversations in this space have become so much more inclusive. And I think that having open platforms and floors to discuss topics like this in are just going to be pivotal in the way that we move forward in every aspect, whether that's from a strategy development, policy development, whether that's in-house or even greater than that. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Arnie to the stage.
Thanks, Leanne. Hi, everyone. So my name's Arnie. Like Leanne said, I am a physio by background, and I work, my substantive post is at St George's down in Tooting in South West London. I normally specialise in frailty and complexity, but at the moment I'm on a secondment at Health Education England, and my main role is looking at, basically looking at the ethnic diversity of AHPs, and it's a real problem at the moment, or it's been a problem for a long time because we're really underrepresented. And so my role is kind of looking at how do we get more people from different ethnic backgrounds into the profession, and also how do we make sure that that journey throughout the profession is actually one of success and where we're able to thrive and really see good levels of diversity in the workplace and serving our local communities.
Lovely. I love that. I think one of the things for me, so first of all, is you being on a secondment. Was there something that came up in and around lockdown, or were you on the secondment beforehand? Can you tell us?
No, so this happened, I suppose it depends which lockdown, because there have been so many, haven't there? So I was during the first lockdown, the first wave of the pandemic, I was working clinically, and then this opportunity came up sort of in the summer. I applied for the post and I started in the beginning of December, so I'm still relatively new. And I suppose over the Christmas holiday was when the pandemic in London was really ramping up.
Yeah.
And I was in post at that point.
And the reason I think part of why I'm asking is, you know, we know that there have been some deficits in terms of AHPs and the diversity of ethnicity, but I'm thinking, you know, how long have people been thinking about working on this and like truly tackling it? Because there's definitely a feeling that as people are speaking now, and it doesn't matter which background they're from, as people are speaking now that we want some more funding, can we get this in place for our workplace because we want to have more conversations within the workforce? It feels like those voices are being heard. So for you to be able to take a secondment in this space seems like a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, and I really see it as that, the fact that HEE have invested in this role specifically, and my role is specifically to look at ethnic diversity within AHPs within London. And I've been kind of asked, like, do you not think it's tokenistic, or do you think, it's a bit too little? But I'm like, it's a start. It's a good starting point. The fact that the London region is saying this is important, we want to invest in it. There's nowhere else in the country where they're investing in it in this way. So actually, if I'm kind of like the front runner in a way, I'm like a pilot study And don't worry, I'm putting the word out that we need to keep it going, and this isn't just a 6 month secondment. It's a huge piece of work that needs a lot more investment in it. But the conversations that I have is that it's big, and that people are listening, and people have been listening for a long time. This isn't just a kind of knee-jerk reaction to something. There's strategies in place. There's kind of well thought out. How do we do this? What do we do? So I kind of, when I started this comment, felt quite reassured in a way that it wasn't just, although I said it's just me, it's not really just me, because there's whole systems surrounding me as well.
I think that one of the things in particular is, okay, so there is this funding, and I really honed in on the fact that you said, is this a small thing? You know, people have questioned whether it's been small, like, is it enough? Is everybody doing enough?
Yeah.
And in my very, very humble opinion in this space, to have any conversation right now and to have that being funded is not just a little thing. You know, that means that somebody at board level, and I've challenged this on so many different occasions, because fundamentally we're asking people who are at board level, who aren't necessarily of ethnic diversities, to provide that funding and to provide those opportunities. And I know I've had lots of conversations with Jack in terms of things like having role models and seeing people being in certain positions, and whether there's a direct impact, you know, of those role models, you know, influencing younger people. But I also think if we're going to take these roles or these opportunities that you have, we want it to stick, and we want them to be there again and again and again, so that there's a real growth for this, you know, as a service development. How have you seen AHP development, like within physiotherapy? What's your insight in that? What could you tell our listeners today about that?
So what, in terms of in my role or throughout my career?
Throughout your career and in your current role, I think that'd be really interesting.
So I suppose when I trained to be physio, which was a long time ago now, as you know, there were 2 people from ethnic minorities in my year out of 50. And there were 2 in every year, which was quite interesting. Okay. That made me think, you know, looking back, there were 2 in every year. That was a reason. It was taking a stick. It was like, tick box, we need to have someone who's got brown skin on the course. And I think throughout my career, I really haven't seen that many people of colour in my teams that I've worked in. And I've worked in central London my entire career, and lots of different areas as well, like clinical areas. So I think for me, there was that real lack of role models, definitely. But now what I see is I'm now in this different space where I'm actually seeing loads of amazing role models of people working in clinical practice and hearing about great work. And I'm like, where were you people when I was a band 5, when I was a band 6? Like, I needed you and you weren't visible to me. So part of my role, I kind of see, is increasing that visibility for people, because, you know, in some of the listening events that I hosted, people said, I'm the only Black person in my department. I've got no one else that relates to what I'm talking about or understands it. And I'm the spokesperson for all, not just Black people, but all BAME people. You know, anyone that isn't white, I'm now their spokesperson. And so, I do see in the AHP world, it is changing, but it's painfully slow. And, you know, for me in my current role, I realized last week, which was quite sort of funny and ironic and sad all at the same time, I kind of looked around and I was like, oh, I'm the diversity. I was like, it's me. It's just me.
It's just me. Well, and I think I wanted to draw on some of the things that you had said in terms of, you said something that really almost tickled me. It was like, when I was a band 5, where were you? Right? Yeah. And I will say, particularly, you know, as the granddaughter of a woman who was a nurse and you know, was working in the NHS, you know, in the 1980s or whatever, when the people were there, but I think that what we have to fundamentally remember is that, and this is for everyone, when you start a role, you know, you go from student life into band 5 life, you're dealing with all the complexities that come with handling a new role anyway. Yeah. So I've got my own caseload, I sign off my own notes, I've got to attend MDTs, I'm working with patients. The last thing that you really need to be thinking about is there anybody in this room that looks like me? And even if that is one of your thoughts, it's not your first thought because you're trying to get on with the job, bearing in mind that many people from certain cultural backgrounds will have struggled with certain, certain elements of discomfort, racism, prejudices, just getting to where they are. So I think that what you're doing in terms of, and we will talk a little bit more about the events that you're hosting, are brilliant, because it doesn't matter what level you are. The support is there and it's open to everyone. Yeah. And I know that there's this constant term, I don't love it, reverse mentoring, but in that space, it almost eliminates the power element of title. I am a senior 1 physiotherapist, I am a band 8A, where naturally the element of power, and I know that particularly within the networking, this BAME networking group, we had a conversation last week about power and what does power make you think of. Now, if you've already got the title, and then there are some prejudices that have been ingrained within a society, when you now get into a space and you want to talk about something, you automatically feel uncomfortable, just the thought of it. So you're instantly not going to raise it as a point because you already feel so challenged, And I think that for me, and I know I'm going to be attending one of your talks on Thursday, I'm sorry I couldn't get onto it last week, but is that feeling that we are erasing those, eradicating those boundaries in terms of being able to talk about, race in particular, and breaking that down for people when they first start work and may feel like they're facing some challenges, I think is so, so important, particularly when you say we want to help people to have a successful journey in their work life, in their career. If we don't know the issues that they're having, we can't help to resolve them. And I can think of a couple of people by name who have told me, as a result of some of these issues, they've left physiotherapy, maybe not on its own, but we've essentially lost some really, really valuable characters because they haven't been able to air their views, their concerns. And I say this, I've said this time and time again, we're a caring profession. If we can't do that for each other as a community, how are we realistically doing that for our patients, and particularly for those who are from these diverse backgrounds? So do you mind telling us a little bit more then about the workshops that you're hosting? Tell us a little bit more about those.
So I suppose in January, when I came back after some leave over Christmas, and basically in London, everything had just exploded. The hospitals were really full. The numbers of COVID patients was just rising, and we're just seeing a bit of the second wave on its way. And I kind of thought, my responsibility in my role is looking after AHPs from a BAME background. And I thought these people are probably, struggling. They might be feeling stressed and anxious. They might be worried, and more so than their white counterparts, because we know the disproportionate effect that COVID has had on our BME communities. Yeah. And so part of me kind of wanted to do something about that, but I didn't know what to do because I needed to speak to more people. So I started initially just by, connecting with a few individuals to kind of say, how are you? What's going on? Like just a welfare check, basically. Yeah, nice. And then I realized, okay, this problem's actually quite big. I need to open this up. So I held 6 different listening events over 2 weeks, and it went sort of live on the system, and within 4 days they were all just completely booked out. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, I thought there was a need, but this really proves that there is a need, that people really want this space to be able to kind of talk freely. So what I did was kept it really simple. And in the sessions, I kind of said, kept the number limited, and I asked people to turn their cameras on if they felt comfortable to do so. And I said, this is a place for us to connect and be honest. I didn't record the sessions. No. And I just said, this is just a check-in. How are you? What are your concerns? And I said, look, guys, I'm working at HEE. I've got a seat at the table. Yeah. I was like, let's make this voice really strong. Tell me what we need to do. I can't do this by myself. And I don't have that level of expertise. I'm not arrogant enough to think I know everything about, the AHP workforce. So I was like, tell me what's going on. Yeah. And I listened, and I've sort of been collating it, and now I'm sort of formulating some actions from that to work out what do we do with all that information.
And do you think, when you're saying that the BAME community have been impacted, or maybe handling, particularly in London, the impact of the second wave slightly differently. Do you think that when our white counterparts have seen you hosting these types of events, that they have been thinking, well, I want to hear, I want to know, why is this not open to me? Because I want to say that because when we know that, within the Charter Society, we've got, only 1.9% of physios are Black, we know that the numbers are really low. It then makes me think then, okay, from a majority, what do you think? Has anybody come up to you and said, why are you doing this? Can I sit in? Is this open for everyone? What has the response been in that way?
Yeah, so what I did is I looked at who had booked on, and on the Eventbrite you can kind of put like what your reasons for attending. And so some people were saying, I want to know more about the BME community. I want to learn. I'm white, but I want to be in that space. And actually, I contacted them sort of one-to-one and said, this is a space that unfortunately you can't be part of. It needs to be a protected space for people to be able to talk freely and feel that psychological safety to be open and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And once I finish all the sessions, I'm going to write it up. I'm going to run it by everyone that attended.
Yeah.
And it will then sort of be a product that other people can read, and then we can have conversations about it. But first and foremost, I wanted it to be a safe space for people to open up. And even within those sessions, some people didn't want to tell the group their name. Some people didn't want to tell people where they worked, and some people didn't want to have their cameras on. So even within that space, there was fear of repercussions. There was fear of being recognised. What's going to happen to me? A lot, and that kind of mistrust. And I talked to sort of colleagues as well who are going to help me on the day, and some of them, majority of them, are white. And we had a conversation about whether they should come or should not. And actually, one of my white colleagues said to me, look, I've read loads of research on this, and actually, if you want an open forum, there has to be, and I'm not going to remember this phrase correctly, but she was like, interviewer participation, cohesion maybe, or something about the interviewer has to look like or sound like the person you're interviewing in order to build that rapport. So I was like, oh, okay, well, there's research on it, so I can do what I thought.
I think there's, when you speak, I'm sorry, I always feel, I think actually the entire physio community must know me now in tears every time we speak in this space. And when you spoke about the vulnerability, people don't want to put their cameras on, people feeling emotional in that space, even when they've been told that the space is safe. A part of me is wondering how long those people have felt like that. Yeah. Not feeling like they can speak up openly. Another bit of me is also saying the white counterparts that want to attend, fantastic. I love the fact that they want to be there, and I'm saying that from me, as a Black person, but also the fact that that space is not about educating white counterparts. And I think that's that space of being vulnerable as a person from a BAME network and educating is a very, very different space. And maybe for me, that's been a trigger in conversation, because I know that when Black Lives Matter came up as a movement, I had lots of my own, I say white counterparts, but also friends, that the space was about education, and it was about saying to people, yes, these are some of the things that I have been through. And particularly in talking to some of my physiotherapy colleagues who didn't know that I myself had been part of certain things. And I think it's not that you don't want your white counterparts to be a part of the conversation, because 100% we do when the time is right. But I think it is so important, so important to be able to have that security, and to be able to be vulnerable. And I know, we're talking to lots of different therapists on Jack's platform, but I'm saying predominantly physios, but that platform is that people know that this is how people feel. I think this alone, if nobody takes away anything else from today, that people recognize that the BAME network within your private clinic, within your NHS environment, they feel vulnerable. We know, we listened to, I know we shared that listening to the YouTube last week, where we listened to researchers, broadcasters, people working in, science-based industries, talking about having the vaccine and how BAME communities feel about that. And I think when somebody says, oh, such and such has refused, or they're not having it yet, or they want to go away and do a bit more research, I think it's a journey that's so much bigger than, oh, just have the vaccine.
Yeah,
it's the history of not what the vaccine means, but what the impact has been of the pandemic to these communities, and then looking at how they feel about what this potential, if I say that the vaccine is a solution to this problem,
Yeah. And the vaccine came up. So a couple of things that you just said. So one thing that really came out from the listening events, and also we've known it for a long time, is that kind of lack of sense of belonging in the workplace, feeling othered, feeling like you don't quite fit in.
Yeah.
You're the only person from a Black background, or you're the only mixed race person in the department, things like that. And that sense of belonging and feeling vulnerable because of it, I think, is really important for people to be aware of. And also with the vaccine, that was the hot topic in all of the sessions. People wanted to talk about the vaccine. And actually, when I was writing it up and unpicking it, I was like, there are questions about the vaccine in terms of efficacy and side effects and all the rest of it. Yeah. But there's also this whole other massive topic about trusting the system and about a historical abuse of power and a kind of long-standing othering. And also just not understanding. So that pressure from managers saying, well, have the vaccine, why haven't you had it? And horrendous things, where someone was saying, they're threatening to name and shame us if we don't have the vaccine. They're going around each department saying, oh, in our department there are 10 people, only 9 people have the vaccine, 2 haven't had it, which is just awful, and that shouldn't be happening. And that feeling of being victimized, but also taking away that choice. And I suppose I'm a real strong advocate for empowering people to make their own decisions. And the NHS should not be saying, you must do this. We're all intelligent human beings. And as AHPs and physios, we've all got a degree. We've all, really intelligent, actually. We can weigh up the pros and cons. We can critically appraise literature. So that's what we should be providing as a platform to have that information, have that discussion.
Yeah.
And people make their decision, and it's not being questioned by other people. You have no right to make those judgments on them.
I think as well, when you say we're intelligent people and we've got degrees and we can critically appraise or, research and literature, for starters, like openly, some of us just don't do that well. Like, let's just face it. Sorry, we just don't. Some of us do not critically appraise research very well. On top of this is the fact that what's happened to your human rights if you have said no, and somebody's threatening to talk about, to say that you didn't? I mean, does the same apply if you do or don't have the flu vaccine? Does the same apply if you have had your MMR jab or whatever, And I don't think that the space, I mean, it's funny that what you're talking about there seems like from that research, you then have themes that I guess you will go away, come back and break down to be looked into further, because there's no way that can't be, that there's not going to be a need to look into some of those things further.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's being fed up. So the work that I've done, I've then spoken to people about it, and it then gets being fed into different work streams to kind of say, okay, well, we know that BAME AHP workforce in London are saying this, and it's going to national EDI level, which is amazing. I'm like, oh wow, that's great. People are actually listening and more higher up the chain than I thought would. But they're really valuing this work, which to me also speaks volumes about they want this change to happen.
And that change is cohesive. Sorry. Yeah. And that change is cohesive, because I think, people, I would say people of colour, I do think actually want to talk and be more vulnerable and be more, exposed and more open with their white counterparts. I think if that space was there, I think people would, the communication would be so much better. I think that people want that. And I'm looking forward to the day that we can have that openly, particularly within our profession, because we know, particularly in comparison to, I think you'd mentioned to me about, well, it's like occupational therapists or speech and language. We don't rank very highly in terms of the ethnic diversity within our profession. And there are probably lots of different reasons that you may well have already, looked into or noticed as trends through your own work life, but again, also in this space whilst you're doing this work.
Yeah, so one of the things about physiotherapy is that it's one of the, in terms of out of the 14 AHPs, it's one of the worst in terms of ethnic diversity. Do
we know why?
So I have some theories as to why, because it's a popular degree.
Yeah.
So therefore the universities can make your entry criteria quite high. In some cases it's higher than medicine. So you can make it really competitive to get in. You can say you have to get A's and B's, which you don't need to be a physio. Like, let's be honest, you don't need A's and B's at A level to be a good physio. You don't need that. But the university will put it that highly to increase the status of their university, to increase the kind of prestige of it. Of, we only accept people with these grades. Then what you have is, because we have institutionalized and structuralized racism that happens in our education system, you have an attainment gap for those from people from ethnic backgrounds. So actually, if you compare what GCSEs and A-levels people are getting, there's a discrepancy. So you've already cut off some of that potential workforce that can come in. And then once you get into university, we have to get in first. So the way the interview process is carried out, the questions they ask you, the fact you have to have work experience. Yeah. If you don't know anyone who's a physio, how are you going to get work experience?
Yeah.
And if your community isn't representative in the workforce, it's a double whammy, isn't it? Like, it's tough to get in. Then if you good enough make it over all of those hurdles to get into university, we then know from literature that you're going to have a worse time. You're going to experience racism on placement, and you're going to feel discriminated against. And that's even before you've even qualified. And then what we see is, once you qualify, as the bandings go up, the ethnicity goes down. So there are, at every kind of point of that pipeline, there are pinch points. And I think that, from what I've found so far, there are similarities in other professions. But because physio is seen as a white middle class profession, it then attracts people that look like that, sound like that, and then it's a self-fulfilling sort of prophecy, I suppose, because it just perpetuates itself.
I think this element of these pinching points that you've described are so important, and I'm really looking forward to the outcome of your work. I'm excited about what it brings up, even if it's bringing up things that we already know, because it's now there in a black and white for us to actually have something to action. And I'm excited about being able to action things. Leanne, can you come and help me with this? Like, if there's anything that I can do to help in any way, please let me know. I will be there.
I will do.
Hopefully without tears.
Going into colleges,
Well, yeah, and I've been doing that. I've been doing that sort of work for a very long time. So, if you need any more work done, if you need any volunteers, I'd be more than happy to be there in that space with you. And I feel like you and I could talk about this as an issue for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, what I would love to see is that we can get an increase in the numbers of BAME people within physiotherapy. Yes, we could be talking about all AHPs, but within physiotherapy. And if we are nurturing this community, like you say, from school through college, and I say all the time, it's not about giving them extra opportunities. It's about those opportunities being fair for everyone. So if somebody is struggling in some way and they're in your class, or they're your student, what is it that they may need to help them to move forwards? Arnie, if we want to get in touch with you, we've got about 30 seconds or so left. Where can we go to find you? How can we contact you?
So the best way is via Twitter. So it's at Arnie_Puntis. You can find me there.
For them?
Sorry?
Can you spell Puntis for them?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Puntis and Arnie, Arnie. So
Lovely.
Arnie_Puntis.
Twitter predominantly?
Twitter is good, or probably Twitter, I think, is the best place.
Fine, yeah, I see that you're quite vocal on there. I just want to say thank you so much for being my first guest. Maybe you should have been the one in a slightly like vulnerable state as opposed to me, but it is what it is, right? I'm really looking forward to my next guest next month. I won't tell you who that is right now. I'm going to leave that open to some surprise. But thank you so much, Arnie. And hopefully, I'm sure we'll get some really beautiful feedback from this show. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Leanne. Thank you.
Bye. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who joined this very first show with me, Leanne Antoine. I call myself the Distinct Physiotherapist. I am distinct, you are distinct, right here on Chew It Over. Jack, once again, thank you so much for allowing me this beautiful opportunity to speak to you, your audience, your community. It absolutely delights me. And I keep saying to everyone, I'm going to be the new Oprah Winfrey in the physiotherapy space, as bold as that might seem. It's just so beautiful to be in this space. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of day. Over and out from the Chew It Over team. Take care and goodbye.